What's up, guys? Hope you guys have all been well and staying safe. Welcome back to another video. Today we've got the Omega Seamaster 300 Professional. It's got everything you'd want from a luxury watch: the practicality, the toughness, the class, all in one great package. And so these are my thoughts on why you should definitely consider the Omega Seamaster 300 Professional as your first luxury timepiece. So the Seamaster is a long, diverse, and complicated line of watches dating back to the 1950s and some even earlier. It's a story so long that, to be honest, it does warrant its own video, but here's the Cole's notes on everything you need to know. This is a story that begins in 1993 with the original Seamaster Professional. The reference number was 253.80.00. This was a watch that took instant popularity. It had an ETA 2892 based movement with the caliber 1120, and it had that iconic wave blue pattern that made it instantly recognizable. 5 years later, it was upgraded to the coaxial 2500, which made use of the Daniels coaxial escapement made by famous English watchmaker George Daniels. Omega had just gained the rights to this, and the escapement was meant to reduce wear and extend service intervals, although this wasn't a full upgrade, as many of the parts were not actually manufactured as intended because Omega had not yet streamlined their manufacturing process. But perhaps what played the biggest role in the success of this watch was Hollywood. Pierce Brosnan, notorious for his role as James Bond, first wore this watch in 1995's GoldenEye. It was a quartz, although they did upgrade it later to the automatic version. The swap from Bond's regular use of Submariners was actually thanks to production designer Lindy Hemming, who wanted Bond to be dressed up with an Omega, having been familiar with their long history with the Royal Air Force and naval operations. It was a watch that was much more well suited for someone fighting evil villains. Many generations and redesign later, we've come to what we have today. Now, first things first, this watch was acquired at Bob Thompson's Jewelers. I'm going to link their Instagram down below. Feel free to give them a shout. They're very, very friendly people. Visit their website. They've got everything you could want, from Tissot's to Frederic Constance to the Omega that you see right here. And so reach out to them and they'll be able to hook you up with exactly what you need. So this is the Omega Seamaster 300 Professional with the black dial, reference number 210.30.42.20.01.001. But that's too long, so it's just known as the SMP 300 Coaxial Caliber 8800 for short. Inside the box, you've got a warranty card, pictograms, and most importantly, master chronometer certification, which we'll talk about in a bit. Now, the box has a glossy finish, and you can even catch some of my gloves in the reflection. And yes, I wore gloves because, trust me, you wouldn't want to see the fingerprints my fat fingers leave behind. And I get to pretend I'm posh. The box is opened by pushing on the only button on the front, revealing the SMP 300 with the wave dial. So we're going to get this box out of the way, and we're going to get nice and close. All right, so that's a little bit better. At first glance, it's pretty hard to not notice the striking design and tribute it pays to the original wave dial. The watch clocks in at 42 millimeters, an increase from 41 in the last generation. It's just under 13.5 millimeters thick, 20 millimeter lug width, 50 millimeters lug to lug, thanks to smart use of lug design that is a bit more vertical and sort of reduces the flare that the lugs have. Now, what this has helped with is it increases the size of the watch without necessarily increasing the wrist real estate the watch is going to take up. So you can rest assured the 1 millimeter increase is not going to affect the presence of the watch on your wrist too much. Speaking of wrist presence, the watch wears very, very well with a perfect balance of sportiness and dressiness. You've got a ceramic bezel with enamel markings, the ceramic making the scratch resistance of it far, far higher. And that's exactly what the chemical ZrO2 on the dial represents. It's zirconium dioxide, a ceramic material far harder and more scratch resistant than their previous generations. And of course, you do have that lume pip at 12 o'clock. Now, the bezel is 120 clicks and unidirectional, obviously, and it has this scallop design to it, which is pretty typical of Seamasters. It can be a little bit hard to turn if you have gloves on or if you have maybe even slightly wet hands, but it does have a very nice action to it. Solid clicking and no play whatsoever. The dial is one of those dials that has an incredible amount of depth, especially as it plays with the light. My camera really does not do this watch justice. I can't emphasize that enough. This thing is absolutely stunning. It's seated under a domed sapphire crystal with anti-reflective coating on both sides, giving a refraction and distortion-free view of the gorgeous dial underneath. From the laser etched waves, the deep black, the loomed hour markings, all this add this beautiful, beautiful three-dimensional effect to the watch, and it makes the watch look a lot less flat, and it sort of gives the watch this beautiful pop effect off your wrist. It really does do a good job at standing out. Speaking of lume, you've got two colors: blue loomed hour hands and markers, and a green one for the minutes. It does glow very, very well initially, but starts to fade a little sooner than I was expecting, but it is still clearly visible nonetheless. There's a nice layer of balance added with the traditional Seamaster loomed sword hands. The minute hand just sweeps across the very edge of the outside of the hour markers, and the hour's hand sweeps just on the inside of those same hour markers. It gives a beautiful sort of symmetry to the dial as the hour hand and the minute hand sort of sweep across. It has this almost very balanced, symmetrical look to it. It just looks very satisfying and pleasing. The case is a beautiful mix of polished and brushed finishing, polishing basically every surface directly pointing at your eye and adding some gorgeous contrast around the edges, especially the beveling that you can see. You got a nice contrast between brushing and polishing. It's textbook Seamaster fashion, but the bracelet is a 5-link tank tread bracelet as it's known. It really wouldn't be a Seamaster professional without this, and this design dates back to the original from the 90s. You can see there's alternating polish and brushed finishing on the links, which sort of gives the illusion that there's a million pieces to the bracelet, but there's actually just 5 pieces. It's a 5-link bracelet. At the bottom of the bracelet, the watch is held together by a double push button clasp signed with the Omega logo in a brushed finish with beveling on the edges as well. The coolest part about the bracelet is this on-the-fly micro adjusting clasp feature that they added. On the inside, you've got a slide mechanism with a push to adjust function. So if you're shooting up for a dive, you can actually account for the extra wrist thickness that your dive suit would give you. But practically speaking, you'd probably use this maybe on a hot day as your wrist swells slightly in the heat, and it just helps the watch wear a little bit more comfortably, a little bit more relaxed on those hot summer days. For those of you who do dive, you've probably noticed there's a helium escape valve at the 10 o'clock position, and as far as I'm concerned, that's useless for me personally. Flipping the watch over reveals probably the best part about the watch in my opinion. It's the coaxial caliber 8800. This is a 55-hour, 35 joule movement beating at 25,200 vibrations per hour with the coaxial escapement designed to reduce wear and increase service intervals. This movement is decorated so nicely with spiraling contours visible through another sapphire crystal. As I mentioned before, this is a master chronometer certified movement. So before we get into what that means exactly, most of you are probably familiar with the term COSC certified. It refers to a certain margin of error, or accuracy I should say, that the movement is allowed to have to be certified as COSC. Generally, that's +4, -6 seconds a day, and this is no easy task for a mechanical timepiece. In fact, less than 5% of Swiss watches actually carry this badge. So what Omega's done, they've gone above and beyond COSC requirements, and they've introduced their own new benchmark, the Master Chronometer. Not only would this prestigious label satisfy all COSC certification requirements, but it goes beyond that and actually takes 10 days to certify a master chronometer. During testing, the watch has to be accurate across multiple wearing positions and temperatures, as well as being exposed to magnetic fields of 15,000 Gauss and checked for continuous accuracy by highly sophisticated microphones and camera tracking technology. This is especially useful in the day and age we live in because we're constantly surrounded by magnetic fields, from your phones to your computers. Basically anything that has a current running through it is probably generating some kind of magnetic field and interference. For mechanical timepieces, that's bad news because obviously you have parts in there that can become magnetized, and that can throw the accuracy of your watch way, way off, and you have to go take it to someone and demagnetize it. It's just not the best scenario. But having this 15,000 Gauss magnetic resistance puts a lot of those concerns at ease. Now, many of their dive watches are also pressure tested to and beyond their listed water depth rating. So all these requirements I just mentioned for the METAS certification, METAS, and that's what the red master chronometer card we saw earlier in the box actually means. You're guaranteed to have a timepiece resistant to the elements and highly, highly accurate. Now, as far as luxury timepieces go, I really don't think you can find better bang for your buck than an Omega in this price range. I really do wonder why you would go looking for a Submariner in today's day and age with the highly, highly inflated secondhand market pricing, especially when you can get just as much, if not more sophistication out of something for, I'm going to say around 60, 75% of the price maybe. Now, 10 years ago, maybe a little bit of a different story, but Omega's come a very, very, very long way. I do really believe they've closed the gap between them and Rolex. Now, I know a lot of you guys are not going to agree with me, but in my opinion, dollar for dollar, Omega does beat out Rolex, at least in sort of their entry level, you know, Submariner, that kind of price range. Submariner, Oyster Perpetual, that kind of range. I think the Seamasters, Aquaterras, those watches, they do a very, very, very good job at giving Rolex a run for their money. But if you guys disagree with me or agree with me, let me know down below. If you guys I know this is a very decisive conversation. Whenever you mention Rolex and Omega, you have the guys who swear by Rolex and won't even take a second look at Omega, and you have the guys who think Rolex is just way overhyped and Omega would be something they would consider. So all in all, this is a very, very solid effort from Omega, combining all the toughness, practicality, and class you could ever need. I really do think that this fills that entry-level dive watch territory in the market perfectly. I don't think there's anything better just yet. Now, if you guys like the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, share the video with your friends, and until next time, stay safe.